On this episode of Delivering Marketing Joy, I talk with Noah Lapine about his new service on the PPAI board and where he finds inspiration. Hey there, and welcome to another edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. I am your host, Kirby Hasseman, and joining me today is a brand new guest. I'm just getting a chance to meet him. I'm super excited. It's Noah Lapine, owner and president of Lapine Industries. Noah, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Kirby. Thanks for having me on, and nice to meet you finally.
Nice to meet you. Exactly right. Exactly right. So I wanted to just jump right in because you've taken on sort of a new role. Your congratulations are in order. I'm being named the newest board member for PPAI. You know, when I see that, I always go, oh my gosh, that's a huge commitment. So, so thank you, I guess, number one, for serving our industry in that way. But why did you decide to serve in this way?
Well, I think having served on boards, both for-profit and nonprofit, and maybe more so in seeing the value of our own board that we started 15 years ago now. Seeing that deep value of a high functioning board, which the PPAI board is, and has made some, amazing pivots over, I think it's like 110 years, which I didn't realize it was around that long until I started getting a little more engaged. And especially at this point of everything being kind of turned on its head. So it's a challenging moment. And I think with high functioning boards, you get people on where hopefully there's a lot they can give, but also I think board work gives a lot back to the individuals who serve on it. And to me, it's an opportunity to do both, to really learn and hopefully to add some value along the way.
So going off script just a little bit, I'm curious. So you added a board for your company. Why did you decide to do that? Do you mind me asking that?
No, not at all. So we're a third generation family business, but we really probably bear more characteristics of second generation because my dad and my grandfather started the business together. Okay. So they were more like partners. My grandfather was 50 years old in 1962 and went out to start his own business.
Wow.
So there was never all those things that you hear about that happen in family businesses where the cousins and nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters and step-parents all get involved in ownership and it's right. We didn't have any of that. It was very clean. There was never more than one owner at any point. It went from my grandfather and my father brought him out. And then suddenly it was me and my brother and my cousin all found ourselves in this, fairly small business together with my dad, who was sole owner, and really no roadmap for any of us. Right. As to what happens from here. So we were fortunate enough to find a program for families in business. And, one of the days on this week-long agenda was about a board. And we actually thought, well, that maybe this whole program isn't right for us if there's a board conversation. I mean, we're a tiny little company. But we stuck around and went to the week. It was a full, week away. And it was probably the most valuable day of the whole program. And they talked about the role that a board can play for any company, but a company of any size, privately held, family owned, and how important they are for family businesses. And gave us kind of the roadmap to do it. And it helped us, really plan out every aspect of our business. Everything has at least passed through that board over the last 15 years. But I give my dad a lot of credit. I mean, here's a guy who ran his own company with nobody looking at anything for almost 30 years at that point, and then to expose your business to a bunch of strangers to tell you what they are concerned about or what doesn't look right to them. That took a lot more courage than it did for the three of us at our early stages of our career.
That's super interesting. I have often thought about that. That's why I appreciate you being willing to kind of vamp a little on that, because I think that's fascinating, and having the, as you said, courage really to open yourself up in that way is, like you said, kudos to your dad. So that's awesome. Well,
absolutely.
So one of the things I notice is success in business comes with evolution, right? And change. And we obviously are living through that right now, those of us who are doing okay. What are some ways your company has evolved over the last few years and maybe even the last few months?
So I think the last few months have been an acceleration, and you hear this a lot, right? It's sped up 3 to 5 years into a period of 6 or 8 months, and I see that with some of the changes that we were turning towards or had made. It's just made those faster. So I think one is our commitment to and integration of digital in everything we do. We've really built out that competency over the last 3 to 5 years with both investing and then having to shift resources in the company and bring in talent that we didn't have. Right. And then trying to educate and create a little bit of a different mindset of selling products rooted in services, as opposed to just standalone products. The product almost became a means to an end, or the last leg of the race, rather than the core of the proposition. Yeah. And those things have absolutely accelerated as all of our clients are looking for ways to engage with consumers and employees when all the traditional means of engaging are off the table. So digital becomes that key vehicle, and so that has accelerated dramatically for us, trying to remove separation as an obstacle. The other piece for us, I think, that has really changed and continues to, is just all these rules that had been baked into our business for 58 years that we thought were just absolutes. Like, you couldn't do business with a client if you weren't sitting in front of them. And there were certain roles in our business that we were, even though we have a global team, we were absolutely convinced there were certain roles that had to take place within our main office. And with no one in our main office, it causes you to have to radically rethink all that. And so those are just some of the things that are really driving some pretty substantial changes for us.
Yeah, I think it's been interesting from a culture perspective for companies and all that sort of thing. And I don't know that we've seen all the ramifications yet, but I think you're exactly right, is that there is no, hard and fast rule anymore, that we have to rethink the way we look at everything. So I appreciate your sort of take on that. So final question for you. I love learning from others. I'm a voracious reader, and I'm trying to constantly get better. So curious, what is some of the best business advice you've ever received?
I go back to, we were talking about my father before, and it's been one of the great gifts of being in a family business. When that's a good thing, it's the best, and when it's not, it's
It's
the
not.
absolute worst, right? And been fortunate, when I said that my dad started the business with his father at 50, one of the great learnings of that for my father was that his grandfather started the business knowing that he wasn't going to see really its best days. So he was instilling his faith in a 21-year-old to say, okay, we're going to do this together, and for it to get to where it needs to go, you're going to have to take it on that part of the journey. I'll be gone by then.
Wow.
And I think for my dad, that has always instilled a mindset that you have to make yourself dispensable to the organization,
right?
And you have to put your faith in that next generation of leadership that's going to get you to where you're going, and don't hold those reins too tight. And again, talk about the courage of the board. I think there's courage in that too, because it's hard to. There's no flashing road sign unless there's some. And you hear this a lot, unless there's some health event or some disaster, right? There's nothing that's telling you it's time to get off the highway now if you're that senior leader of the business. So having the wisdom and courage to know when that might be, and turn over the keys and let people mess up. My dad used to always say, if there was a mistake, it's only money, and if you go work hard and make more of it, that you can overcome, but you got to go take chances, and you got to let other people take those chances, not have a fear of failure. And then the other thing, and I think this current crisis we're in certainly underscores it, is the business was always focused on diversification of revenue streams, of channels, of industries. And there were times when that felt like a disadvantage. I mean, I remember when pharmaceuticals was just the biggest game in town in our industry.
Yep.
And we were going against people that in their very name, they were pharma supporters. That was their business. And it felt like a disadvantage until overnight with the pharma laws, they couldn't buy anything anymore. And those businesses were at zero. We saw it here. We have a vertical that focuses on hospitality. And I mean, literally like nothing I've ever seen before. It went from here to zero overnight with COVID. So the ability to shift resources into those other areas that were either in some ways elevated because of the crisis or holding their own, you know, having that diversification within our business served us well and has done so for over half a century.
I am fascinated by that because it's something I've always struggled with, Noah, is that we are very diverse. So when times are good and you're meeting with suppliers and they're like, well, what are your number one markets? And I'm always like, we're kind of what the industry looks like. We have manufacturing and healthcare and education and we're diverse. And I think sometimes that does impede crazy growth, but it does limit crazy drop off, right? Like I've seen that in bad times where we don't take quite the hit sometimes that those folks who are completely specialized do. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's tricky, you know, and I think you're right. Sometimes it can add what may feel like unnecessary complexity to the business,
right?
Until you need it, and then suddenly it's a blessing. You know?
Yeah, totally. Well, you have answered my 3 questions, and I appreciate you taking the time. I give everybody a chance to ask me one question. Do you have one for me?
Well, I'm curious. You had mentioned to me when we were speaking earlier that you had family involvement in this industry, so you were aware of it as a business path. But if I were to take you back 20 years ago and you were looking at about where you thought you'd be 20 years from now, I'm curious what part of that vision did you get right and what part would be very different?
Yeah, you know, I think I was always fascinated by this business, but then I went off to college and I got into the video world, and I went down the path that I think many of us were kind of guided to do. Go, you know, get good grades, go to college, get a job, work for someone. And I think what it took me a while to understand is I'm at my very core an entrepreneur. And I had to break free of working in the corporate world so that I could go out on my own. I remember vividly when my wife, who was in sales in this industry, when we were young and we needed more money, whether it be Christmas or whatever, she would just go work harder and make more money. And I remember I would work harder and I did fine. It wasn't bad money, but it never was affected by my effort. That was weird to me just inherently. And so for me, I think I end up where I probably should have been from the idea of owning a distributor business and a marketing business. But because I'm very entrepreneurial by nature, I think I will end up working like in some business, like creating some business. Even if this one goes away, I'll end up doing it again. So for me, I think I've ended up in the right place, whether it's this business or another business, but starting something gets me excited. And so in that way, I think, you know, not 20 years ago, 40 years ago, this is where I thought I'd be when I was 6. You know, when I was a young kid thinking I wanted to be a business owner, this is where you know, it's funny. I think I actually took a detour in the middle because I was doing what everybody thought I should do. Huh. But now I think I'm where I'm supposed to be.
That's terrific. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. Well, thank you, Noah. Appreciate you taking the time and appreciate your service on the board. I know it's a big commitment. And I mean that. I think sometimes we don't always appreciate the level of work and dedication it takes to do that sort of work. So kudos to you, man.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Kirby.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Delivering Marketing Joy. We'll see you next time.